This is the best camera for adventure filmmaking. This little thing has taken me all over the world. It has filmed basically every outdoor sport you can imagine. Rock climbing, ice climbing, skiing, surfing, kayaking, canoeing, mountain biking, trail running, backpacking, swimming, and the list goes on. And after taking it on all my adventures over the years, I've decided that this is actually the best camera for adventure filmmaking. Let me explain why. As an adventure filmmaker, cameras are just one tool in the toolbox, but it's a pretty important tool. This camera has allowed me to build a six-figure film and photo business. It's allowed me to work with Patagonia, Outside TV, The North Face, La Sportiva, and many others. This little thing has even shot films that have been projected on all types of screens, from giant 50-foot screens in theaters to local breweries where I've shown my films about ice climbing and mountain guides. And to make these adventure films, the technology that we're asking of companies is pretty difficult, which I totally understand. These cameras need to be rugged, but small. They need to have great battery life, but also light and easy to transport. And most importantly, they need to look good in a variety of conditions, from bright snow to underwater scenes to tops of mountains in the middle of the night. That's a big ask on these companies, but I think Sony has done it. And to prove my point, I'm gonna lay out these 4 reasons why the Sony a7S III is the best camera for adventure filmmaking. The first characteristic, and an important one for a great adventure film camera, which I believe the Sony a7S III has, is robustness. This thing can take a beating. This has been dropped down mountains, it's been dropped in a field, it's actually even been flooded. When I was filming the Goat Surf Club series in Senegal, my water housing kind of broke when it slammed against a rock. Water started flooding in. I got some beeping and an alert from my water housing that it was filling with water. I swim to the surface, I open it, sure enough, water everywhere. I have to swim in with the camera above my head, and somehow, miraculously, the camera worked the next day. This was the start of a 2-week surfing expedition in Senegal, and if I didn't have this camera, I would have been pretty bummed. But it still worked. I don't really understand how, but that's an example of how durable this camera is. When you're filming outdoor adventure sports and you're out in these elements with wind and sand and snow and water, there's only so much you can do to limit the exposure of your camera to these elements. Sure, you can hide it in a raincoat or put it in a bag, but inevitably it's gonna get exposed to something that you don't want it to, and having a camera that you trust and that you know is durable enough to take it allows you to continue filming when the going gets tough. The most important time as adventure filmmakers to pull out your camera is when things are going wrong. So if you take out a camera that isn't able to handle those elements, you lose out on a really amazing potential story opportunity. But making a good film and having a good camera doesn't mean you just have this brick that you can take into the wilderness and it's subjected to anything and it'll survive. It also needs to have good technical abilities. And that's where I think the Sony a7S III especially shines. This mirrorless camera has an amazing sensor, unlike anything I've ever worked with before. And I've worked with a lot of cameras, from Canon to Fuji to Red to Nikon, and I found that I am not above getting rid of my Sony to go with the camera that I believe is best for my workflow. And as somebody that films, directs, shoots, and edits most things myself, I like to have a camera that is really easy to edit with, but still looks amazing. And I think the Sony a7S III does just that. This thing is incredibly capable of capturing amazing footage. It shoots 4K in all types of frame rates, from 24 to 30 to 60 to 120. Having 4K 120 while still recording sound is pretty phenomenal. But resolution doesn't really mean anything if it doesn't come with good codecs, and the 422 10-bit codec allows for amazing colors right out of camera from Sony. Not to get like too nitty-gritty, but there are a few colors that I think it does especially well. Look at this example of filming in the Costa Rican jungle. Those greens are just phenomenal. But beyond the colors and the resolution, I think that autofocus is something that is especially amazing about the Sony a7S III. It just works. I just want something that works. When I'm skiing down a mountain, or I'm climbing, or I'm in the water with my water housing, filming surfing, and there's sea urchins and jellyfish, I don't want to be worrying about manually focusing. I just want my autofocus to know what's going to be in focus, know what the subject is, and nail it. And it does that almost every single time. But I think the true advantage of this camera comes in its low light capabilities. This camera basically has 2 native ISOs, which means at ISO 640 and ISO 12800, there's essentially no grain. There's no noise in your image. It's slightly different at each, but you can shoot at 12,800 ISO without any problems. And I do, frequently. In adventure filmmaking, the adventure is not over when the sun goes down. The adventure is over when the adventure is over. And when you get caught out in a really amazing place with a really amazing story happening, and I feel like I can crank this ISO to as high as possible, I know that I can still capture this story and tell an amazing experience and capture these moments, and my camera is not gonna get in the way. And in fact, my camera is gonna help enable me to tell these stories in a better way, because it's still gonna capture these experiences, but in a cinematic way. If you've tried filming at night with other cameras, you know how difficult it can be to capture the detail of what you're wanting to capture. And in this camera, I've never had that problem. In some of my night scenes, it's even possible to see stars with this camera. It is unbelievable, the low light capabilities, and it allows me to tell deeper and more meaningful stories, which is what this camera technology should do. It should allow us to go out, have adventures, and come down with those mountains with these stories. We don't leave the moments at the top, we come back with them. And this camera allows us to tell those stories at a deeper and more meaningful way. My final point about this camera sensor, which I guess maybe it's a part of the sensor, but it could also be the lenses. Regardless, the in-body stabilization on this camera is awesome. I'll be the first to admit that I like gimbals. Everybody's trying to replace gimbals and having really strong in-body stabilization so much that you don't need a gimbal. I actually value the importance of gimbals because I know that no matter how good camera technology can get, filming, skiing next to somebody on a gimbal on these mirrorless cameras allows you to go way tight on your lenses and still have a smooth feel. So I've filmed skiing 105 millimeters, really tight details of somebody skiing, and it's really stable. So I'm not trying to replace my gimbal, but having a camera with such strong in-body stabilization that I don't have to use a gimbal when walking around town or filming verite scenes allows me to stay light and breezy when I film. When you combine the in-body stabilization of the camera with the in-body stabilization of some of Sony's lenses, such as the 24-105, which you know that I will rave about on this camera until the end of time, when you combine those two, the footage looks great. It looks stable, you can walk around, you can get great shots, and you don't have to worry about carrying a gimbal with you everywhere, but on those really important, beautiful mountain shots or specific shots in the outdoors that require maybe a little bit higher production value, i.e. skiing with the gimbal or filming somebody from a car on the bike, allows you to get really tight and still get those beautiful shots. So I'm not saying the Sony a7S III's stabilization is gonna get rid of your gimbal, because I think gimbals will always have a place in filmmaking, but it does allow me to leave the gimbal at home for a little bit of a more handheld look that feels a little bit more natural. I feel like there's a lot of hate when it comes to the shakiness of mirrorless cameras, when people want to build bigger and bigger rigs, but I don't really see that in my camera. So I feel like if you want to watch some of the films on my channel and let me know if you see that handheld shaky footage that comes from mirrorless cameras, let me know, because most things on this channel in the past couple years were shot on the a7S III. So yeah, leave a comment below on any of those videos, be like, I noticed the shake. But if you look for it, you might be able to find it, but if you're not looking for it, my bet is you won't notice. Before I move on to this third point, I'm actually gonna move because it's starting to smell like horse manure here next to this ranch. All right, now we've moved, we're away from the horse manure, we got some good mountains behind me. Let me tell you about the photo capabilities on this camera. I know this maybe isn't 100% related to adventure filmmaking, but in my experience, if people are wanting an adventure film, they often want photos to go along with it. So my huge hesitation when I was looking into buying this camera was the 12 megapixel sensor. The 12 megapixel sensor for me felt like I am limiting myself on the photo capabilities. I'm not gonna be able to deliver photos to clients. I'm not gonna be able to have a professional photography camera with me, and I'm gonna always have to bring two camera bodies whenever I go on these big adventures. And if you're thinking about buying this camera, let me tell you that is not a worry you need to have. All of these photos that you are about to see were taken on the Sony a7S III.
Sky is burning on full display.
Adventure filmmaking and adventure photography is more than just capturing these images. It's about embracing the raw, untamed beauty of our world and the people in it. And these cameras allow us to share that with others. Each photo here tells a story of perseverance, exploration, and the profound connection between humans and nature. Through this camera and through its lenses, we witness the majesty of towering peaks, the serenity of untouched forests, and this amazing power of roaring rivers. Adventure photography and filmmaking can inspire us to venture beyond our comfort zones, to seek out the extraordinary in the everyday. It reminds us the fragile beauty of our planet and our responsibility to protect it. By documenting these moments, we not only preserve memories, but also ignite a sense of wonder and respect for our beautiful Earth. This camera allows us to continue to capture these breathtaking vistas and heartfelt experiences, encouraging others, not just ourselves, to explore, respect, and cherish the adventures that await them. And that may feel too heartfelt for a camera review, but it's how I feel. Photography is this beautiful medium that can take us places, and I believe filmmaking can have an amazing transformative effect on how we see the world. And the cameras and the tools that we use to do that are of course just a tool, but I think picking the right tool allows us to tell the right type of stories and put us in these places where we can document this beautiful place around us. And finally, to wrap up my final point, I believe the Sony a7S III is great because it doesn't need anything else. I feel like there's this move in filmmaking that bigger is always better. The more you have on your camera, the more professional you look to clients, the more big paying jobs you'll land, the bigger your screens will present on, the bigger the paychecks, the bigger the potential for Netflix deals down the line. But I don't think that's always true. Sometimes less is more. I've talked about it already on this channel that I believe less is more in filmmaking, and my opinions about cameras is the exact same. When I shoot on this camera, when I create my films, I will shoot on this. I will sometimes throw away my microphone and just rely on one Tascam DR10L lavalier microphone and this camera. And that has granted so many amazing opportunities. My films have been shown all over the world at film festivals. I even got nominated for an Emmy recently. And things are continuing to develop in my career despite refusing to get bigger and bigger cameras. I want something small that I can treat like my phone. I can chuck in the bottom of a bag. I can carry out with me in the snow and not worry about it getting damaged. I think it's important to have these tools as tools and not as precious things that are allowing us to get more work. An architect likely won't get hired to make a house because of the materials that he uses, but rather because of the style that he brings to that design. I like to think of filmmaking in the same way. If you're constantly trying to build bigger cameras to look more impressive, are you doing that for you? Are you doing that for your community? Or are you doing it for the film? On your next film project, think about what you can get away with. Can you get away with just bringing this along and telling a meaningful story? Or do you need to have something bigger to show a client or something phenomenal to post on Instagram? For me, I like to focus my energy on telling meaningful stories in the outdoors and capturing beautiful visuals along the way. And this camera allows me to do that. Sure, down the line, Sony or Canon or someone else may make a camera that allows me to do it even better, but at the current moment, I can't imagine needing more than what I need now. In order to progress in my career, I don't need bigger cameras. I need to be a more empathetic person. I need to conduct more heartfelt interviews and connect deeper with subjects. I need to perhaps be a little bit better of an athlete so I can go on bigger and bigger adventures with these people. I need to maybe hone my mountain biking skills a little bit or practice backcountry skiing a little more so I can get my safety systems dialed. There's so many skill sets that are required for making a great adventure film. And the camera you need is just, like I said, one tool in that toolbox. And now that you know what the best camera is for adventure filmmaking, ask yourself, what am I gonna go create with it?